This is a rare late century Seiko 5 slim diver, which looks like it's been absolutely beaten to death for the last 30 years. The bezel is locked solid and completely faded, the crystal's wrecked, and the whole watch itself is absolutely filthy. God knows what's hiding underneath this thing. But if we could bring it back, we could have a great addition to the collection. Let's see what's under this bezel. That is insane. Look at the state of it. There's filth everywhere, all over the bench already. The crystal is definitely not as good as it could be, and you can just tell why that thing was locked in. The stem and crown aren't really winding properly either, so there's another fault. What are we going to do here? Let's open this bad boy up and see what we're dealing with inside, because I'm not hopeful right now. Yeah, this is filthy. Doesn't look too bad, but there's some discoloration there, so you can tell this thing hasn't been serviced in God knows how long. Let's get this movement out and see if we are going to be able to fix this thing, because I'm not sure we're going to be able to at this point. And that's why the stem wasn't turning. We'll have to deal with that one later, I think. Get this little plastic movement holder out. That dial is actually nice, but look at the state of the edge there. Someone has been to town on this thing, like you can tell. The amount of glue they've put on it already is not a good sign. I really, really hate it when you open up a watch and it looks like this. There's nothing better than when you open it up, unscrew it, and take it apart normally. But when it's glued down together, the stem not attached properly, you just know you've got your work cut out for you. And look, the hands are like stuck together. And that's not from the glue there, but that's obviously from dried oils and gunk and stuff that's got into this movement over the years. I'm trying to be quite careful here to see kind of the extent of what's going on with it. But yeah, they've glued it after the fact there. So they've put the dial onto its spacer and glued this thing down. So it's like partially glued to the movement and also glued to the spacer. Not really ideal, if I'm honest. Why not just use dial dots if you're going to do that? Does not make my life easy, okay? But we got it off, and I'm not too sure if we're going to even try and do anything with that, but we'll leave that one till later, because yeah, right now we need to get this movement back to health. And I'm putting a lot of pressure on that, so this thing is stuck in there good. See that green stuff around the edge? I think that's, dried oil over the years. And that's unscrewed, and still it's stuck there. Yeah, you can see that grease there, that's just kind of turned into sludge. And the balance not really ticking too well either. I think we've got ourselves a restoration on our hands here, guys. Still need to be super careful with that one. And this movement right here is one of Seiko's legendary movements. It's a 7002 movement. I actually worked on one of these in a previous video on the channel, and that was also a great diver. However, not the same as this one. This is like a slim Seiko sports diver, and it's a kind of transitional diver in the late 80s, early 90s, where they wanted it to be more of a sports type watch. So yeah, they slapped this movement in there, made it quite a slim one that you could wear on the wrist every day, rather than it being quite a chunky cushion back one. And this thing is stuck so hard. But with our little cleaning process, we should be able just to get rid of all of that dried oils and put a fresh set on there. At least that's exactly what I'm hoping for. and then the train bridge comes off. And this thing's kind of stuck down there too. Well, the wheels are definitely a bit sludged in there. That barrel looks like it hasn't been opened in well over 30 years. I would say that barrel has never been opened. And you obviously don't want to, you don't really want to do that. You don't want to bend the hands, but at the same time, you don't want to ping them across the room. And now we've stripped down the rear side of the watch, which is where all the power comes from. We need to have a look at the front side and take a look at the edge of this. This is just barbaric to do this to a watch, honestly. It should be sacrilege. There's got to be another way. Re-put some dial screws down or something. But overall, apart from the stickiness of the watch, it's not looking too bad. There's not much corrosion in there. That wheel's gone a bit black. I'm not too sure if that's completely normal or not, but I've never seen the wheel go that black unless there's been some corrosion there, which is not looking like that's the case with the rest of the watch. And once we pull this thing apart, we're going to have to clean every single little piece of it and then try and get this back together. But the real task is going to be towards the end. Once we get this thing working, if we get it working, we are going to need to have a full overhaul of that case because it's all oxidized. Everything's looking a bit poor on the outside. It needs new crystal, new bezel insert. It's definitely going to need a clean. This watch is in pretty poor condition, if I don't say so myself. And guys, we are on a mission to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of August. Our lineup is absolutely stacked. We've got a Rolex Oyster Date Perpetual. We've got a King Seiko. We've got a couple of Omega 60s and 50s in the pipeline. So definitely going to want to be subscribed so you don't miss those. Also, really helps the channel. Thanks. And I'm trying to get this stuff off the edge now, and it's going to take me ages just to go around with this piece of pegwood and scrape it off because it's just unrequired on there. It's not going to do anything to the watch, but ultimately it just doesn't make you feel good. But now we move into the barrel opening part. And these Seiko barrels are just not meant to be opened. They are so difficult to get off. Most Swiss ones have a little cut in the side which you can kind of open quite easily. This one you need to kind of really put some pressure on it. And now it's a careful part where you need to apply some pressure to keep hold of this tiny barrel. And this spring in here is basically what powers the watch. So keen to see the condition of it. I don't actually have a spare one, so if it is broken, I'm going to have to wait and order a new one. But it's not looking crazy bad. I mean, would I prefer to have a fresh one in there? Yeah, but this one would do just fine once it's been cleaned and oiled. And these are all the parts of the watch, basically. Now we move into the cleaning process, and you can see I've used that before, and you use it multiple times, I think, until it's quite black, to be fair, and it just cleans all of the old oils off of the watch parts. And in it will go into this little ultrasonic machine. And then it goes on for 14 minutes. You get another cycle in with the clean wash. You see right now that's quite a clean one. That's not the same one that went in there. And then after that, all the parts are basically cleaned. Now we've got to deal with putting the barrel back on. And if you've seen in my previous videos, you know we need to invest in a mainspring winding set. Not too sure why I haven't yet, completely honest, because this thing is a pain in the back, as you're about to see in a moment. So you have to wind it all the way around, And then once you have wound it and fought with it for a while, especially an older mainspring, you pop it in, and sometimes the middle of the spring can be a bit loose. So you need to tighten it with the tweezers a bit, making sure that you're quite careful and not to break it.
Oh no.
And also not to do that. Anyway, we got it back together. And now we move back on to the assembly part of the process. And this is where we're going to find out if the cleaning process worked, if we've broken anything on the way. And hopefully that's not the... Yep. Finesse out the window. It's funny, we've been doing watch repair now for about 6 months. We're going into our 7 month solid. And no matter how many times you strip down this watch, clean it, oil it, put it back together, you think you could have done everything correct, and you're just still not going to know at this point. So it's almost like magic at the end when it does start working. And if it doesn't work, you're kind of like, what's going on? Actually, most of the time that hasn't happened yet, and they have actually worked eventually. But yeah, it's kind of a guessing game at this point. But you can see how much cleaner all these parts are just from going through that short cycle there. Everything was kind of sticking together before. Everything was hard to pull out of their pivots. And now everything's just kind of slotting back in quite nicely and looking like it's got a bit of a shine on it. I've also got most of that glue off from around the edge as well by putting the base plate back into the machine a couple of times there. And then this part you do have to be quite careful with, because on the bottom of those wheels there's these very small needle looking things, these pivots, and they are very, very easy to break. We've broke one before, haven't made that mistake again since, but it just requires quite a bit of care at this point, because you have to align those little needles with those purple jewels, and they basically sit in there and allow it to constantly spin and basically not break down in the process. But this bit here, you need to get that second pivot in. Well, you actually have to align all 3 of the train wheels, all 3 of the circular spinning wheels into their little jewels. And on the Seiko, I've got to say it's pretty easy, but on some of the other watches, depending on the layout and depending on how many you're trying to fit in at once, it can be super difficult. Now we have to get the ratchet wheels back on, and this is kind of a fairly big moment, because that paw lever is what powers the whole watch. So if that paw lever is not collected, and then by the paw lever I mean the circular part on the left that's connecting to the wheel right now, if that's not connected properly and is too tight or isn't sitting properly, it will not move that wheel so that it charges up the mainspring. And then we'll get no power to the watch, and the watch basically won't run. So I'm going to test it now just to see if it's clicking. It's running, it's a bit tight there. There we go. So you can see the wheel below running or spinning, and that's because the power is going through to the mainspring and then pushing out onto the train wheels. So it's a good sign. It's a good sign. And then from here, I flip the watch over and start doing the dial side and adding the motion works back in, the keyless works, adding the stem, and basically putting that all together before we move on to the power. I don't know why I do it in that order. I think there's many ways to skin a cat, so to speak, on this. I think sometimes when I've been really, really concerned that it's not going to work, I will leave it to the very last minute to figure out whether it is or not. But yeah, I think right now this is the best format I've found. If you found anything different and you're doing watch repair yourself, I'd love to hear which way you guys do it, because yeah, I think this is I think it's the first way I learned how to do it, and I just never have switch to a different format. I know some people finish off the back completely, but I think with the balance, the heart of the watch being in there, it's best just to get all the manhandling out the way and then add the balance. But yeah, keen to hear what you guys think. And what do you think about this watch so far? I'd love to hear your thoughts on the restoration itself, and if there's anything you guys think I'm missing or could be doing better, I'd love to hear it. And this little part on the left here is actually what makes the date click round. So it's a date jumper spring, I think. And it kind of interconnects with what holds down the stem and the clutch wheel, which is kind of a dual clutch wheel inside. In the Swiss watches, there's actually two parts that go in there, but in the Japanese watches and some Chinese watches as well, there will only be the one, which actually simplifies it quite a bit. I'm not too sure why Swiss companies are still going for the two when you could just have one, you know. Everything's going good so far, but we can't activate the spring until we've secured it, because there's nothing worse than putting that spring part down on the left and then trying to secure it down and all of the parts just go and flying. So we need to make sure everything's secure down, and then we can put on the wheels for the motion works and see if that's going to make everything else fly around nicely. One thing I love about mechanical watches is that it truly doesn't matter how old a watch is. Like, you can always find the spare part for the watch. Even if you needed a completely new movement, you can still steal the dial, the case, everything, keep that all original and just find a new movement for it, worst case scenario. Actually haven't done that yet. We have an Omega in our inventory at the moment. The movement is absolutely wrecked. So I'm on the hunt for a Omega 285 caliber, and I'm probably going to need the whole thing to get this watch running again. It's a lovely little watch, but yeah, we need to find a movement basically and do a movement switch for it, because it's just not viable. It's fully corroded inside. Luckily, this watch wasn't like it, but yeah, if it was, you just find another one. And Seikos are relatively cheap to figure out the new one. And that's another thing as well. If you're looking to get into watchmaking, Seikos are not a bad place to start. I know if you look back on my channel, I started on manual wind, basically the cheapest manual wind I could find at the time, and that was from the 1950s. But the Seiko, even with the date complication, is super easy to work on, and if you break it, not expensive to refix. So not a bad way into it. But equally, there's so many kits out there now where you can actually have a watch at the end of it. Like, I've done one of those DIY club kits on my channel, and they're just brilliant. I know they're a bit more pricey, but if you want a watch to wear at the end, you've got one there and you can reopen it and get used to cleaning and oiling it. Now, this is all the motion works now in place. Just going to get this spring that clicks onto the actual date wheel, and that holds that in place and clicks it round. So the jumper kind of moves it when you're using the crown, so when you're pulling it out into the date setting position, but this spring actually clicks it forward basically. Pretty interesting design. Honestly, I wonder who the first person was to come up with this. Absolutely crazy. I think that's another part that I'd love to get into after. I think at the moment my goal really is to, do reps on all different types of mechanical watches, building up till you get to more luxury watches. Like, we've got the Rolex coming, so I'm super excited about that. I honestly thought it would be years before I touch a Rolex, and the fact that one's coming soon, it's actually coming tomorrow, is super exciting. So that's my aim at the moment, is just to get really comfortable with servicing all types of watches. And then I think eventually I'd love to design my own watch fully and, get a prototype in and really look at, building your own watch, because I think there's nothing better than, we know right now that these mechanical watches last forever. So imagine building your own watch and it literally lasting forever. I think that's such a cool idea. What do you guys think? Is that something that you've ever thought about doing? Even if it was just the dial side of watchmaking. There's dial design, there's case design. It's very interesting. There's a whole rabbit hole you can go down. And this palette fork, now we're moving on to the moment of truth. I've just added some 9415 Mobius oil, and you need the tiniest speck of it, and it basically helps with amplitude a little bit, and helps the flow between that and the escape wheel, that last wheel we put in. and it just sits in its little pivot there, and now we have to get the bridge on, and then we'll be looking to do the final moment of truth for this watch. Got to take some care here, because if you try and rush this part, you won't seat it properly, and then you'll be sat there for a while thinking, what's going on? And actually it's just not in its pivot correctly. I think that's a big learning curve at the beginning, is the pallet fork seating and also the balance seating. Getting those two to work together, because you don't know what's going on. You don't know if there's something else in the watch that you might have done wrong. But that snap there is basically the kind of perfect sign that you want. You want it to snap cleanly forward and backwards. Now we're moving on to the balance wheel. It's actually in pretty good condition, that balance wheel. Sometimes you see them, they're absolutely wrecked. But now we need to find out if this thing's actually going to start ticking for us. I'm honestly not that hopeful at the moment, because it didn't seem like there was a great deal of power going into the watch there. And we didn't change the mainspring. So the mainspring was okay. It wasn't snapped or anything, but it was slightly tired. Yeah, that's not good. That is not good at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually, because trying to get power just with a poor lever takes quite a long time. So if you remove that wheel and manually turn that ratchet wheel, you're basically manually winding up the barrel there. Now the poor lever is working. I know it's working because the pallet fork was snapping, but is it working enough? It didn't look like it, because there's no power going towards the balance right now. There we go. There we go. That's good news. Now we've got power. Let's see what it looks like on the time grapher. 9 milliseconds beta. It's not good. 139 and 70. 160 amplitude. What is going on there? Now I'm going to move the stud a little bit. Also move the stud carrier there on the left hand side. Both of those need moving to basically correctly regulate it. And this was the best I'd done after about an hour and a half of regulating it. Got it down to 0.6, so that was obviously a massive part of the amplitude situation there as well. And the amplitude can basically depend on the balance and how that's seated and how the hairspring geometry is. So yeah, we got it pretty good. 11 seconds a day, and 260, 270 for a Seiko is not bad, I think. Let me know what you think about that, if you think I could have done better, if you weren't happy with the results yourself. But overall, I think not too bad. I would have liked to straight align. And now we're getting into the bezel. Honestly, I've been excited about this bezel to fix it for ages, because that bezel was absolutely wrecked. So we took the top off and scraped out some of the gunk that was left in there that the ultrasonic cleaner didn't get out. And we got this fresh bezel. No, it's not blue. I was trying to go for black, but it came out, it's come to me grey. So you stick some sticky bits on the bottom there, and you just click that in and hold it down, and the adhesive stuff will hold it in for you. And let's check this bezel out, because this is going to be such a difference. Just making sure that's secure there. That is fresh. I know it's not completely perfect compared to how the watch before, but that's way better than what it was. Now we're going to polish this case up, because luckily it doesn't seem to be a brush finished case. You can just polish this one, but you've got to be a bit careful not to go too crazy. So the polish actually makes the metal heat up quite a bit. So if you feel like you're putting your hands together and rubbing your hands, but the polish is doing that to metal, and it can actually strip some of the metal away. So if you polish a watch case too hard, you'll actually change the geometry of the case. So you've got to be quite careful with it, and then not go too crazy on it. I don't think I could over polish it with my little handheld one, but look how it's already come out there. Really good. Now we're going to get the new glass on, and this glass is actually super inexpensive. I got 2 of them for like £2.50 off AliExpress for this watch, and then that just clicks in, but you don't want to click it too hard that you're going to smash the glass. It's quite a thin piece of glass. And then I just go around the edges, making sure that it's clicked in, and then one final strong push. Fresh. That's looking pretty darn good. And then I'm trying to get it to see if it will turn, but I think the ball that sits around the edge of the case, which basically clicks the bezel round, click, 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 is worn. Honestly, I've never changed one of those over before, but if you push the bezel in hard enough, it kind of just stays in place. It doesn't wiggle around or anything. So, and you'll find that on quite a lot of old divers. So I'm not touching that dial. I actually think the dial's in really good condition for its age, to be honest. Still got a lot of character there. Just going to flip the date round to make sure that the 12 o'clock spits over. Get these hands back on, and the hands match the dial perfectly there. Now the minute hand. What would you guys have done? Would you have done anything to this dial? Would you have tried to relume the hour markers? Because it would be pretty cool to know how to do that, because you could literally bring watches back to life. But from what I've seen, it's extremely difficult without real machines and stuff. And that's working quite nicely. We've got to get this back in its case. And because the crown and stem are at 4 o'clock, but the date's at 3 o'clock, it's actually a little bit of a pain to marry those up. But yeah, we're getting there. There we go. Case back on. Check that out. That is looking fresh. Now we got a fresh beads of rice bracelet. I know it would have been on something a bit different, I think. But this is going to look 10 out of 10, I think. I think it's going to look good. And that just clicks in. Boom. So this was it at the beginning. Absolutely wrecked. You can't say that isn't ready for the bin, because I think it is. And this is it at the end. What a transformation. That is extreme as they come. If you enjoyed this restoration, a quick like really helps YouTube put it in front of other watch nerds. And if you want to see more forgotten watches brought back to life, make sure you're subscribed. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.